Hello and welcome to this PAT Keyhole tutorial. My name is Brandon Evert, and if you are coming over from my podcast, Extracting Wisdom, thank you very much for listening and checking out this video. If you haven't heard of my podcast, head on over to iTunes, Spotify, or right here on my YouTube channel to take a listen. In this video, I'm going to walk you through how to approach a keyhole question on the perceptual ability test on the DAT. The most important thing to these questions is understanding the three types of perspectives you can have of a three-dimensional object. And what I mean by this is if we were going to look at this object right here in this sample question I have, as you can see, we have the top-down, the front, and the side perspective. So the top-down perspective, imagine if you were floating directly above this object and looking down upon it in this direction. That's what the top-down perspective would be. In the front view, this is more of a head-on perspective. So if you were looking straight on of this three-dimensional object, that's what the front view would be. And then, of course, you have the side view. So that's looking at it from this way right there. Okay, so those are the three perspectives. If you are just starting out with these questions, I would recommend that you draw each of these out when answering these questions, just so you can get a better understanding of how these perspectives work. Now, as you get closer and closer to the exam, try to do all of this in your head. That's going to drastically increase your efficiency and save as much time as possible for you for other sections of the perceptual ability test. Okay. And without further ado, let's get right into this question. Now, the key is, again, to visualize or draw a perspective of an object and then eliminate your answers based on that perspective. And eventually, once you've gotten through all of those perspectives, you'll be able to confirm your answer. Another key fact is look at the answers. You can see that 3 out of the 5 answers are the top-down view, and you'll understand that this is the top-down view the more and more you do these questions and as we go along with this tutorial. But that, based on that fact of the majority being the top-down view, let's start there because we'll either find our answer the fastest or we'll be able to eliminate the majority of the answers. Okay, so starting with the top-down view, we're going to kind of denote 3 different parts to this object. We have the little chimney, the big chimney, and then the main part of this house. It looks like a house, so that's what we're going to roll with. Now, let's start with the main part of the house. Looking down on just the main part of the house, we are going to see a rectangle, okay? And that is because when 2 points meet, like a triangle, it's going to form a rectangle. So this dotted line here that I'm drawing represents the intersection of those 2 slants of them coming up. So if you can visualize that. So that's the first part. Now we need to focus on the little chimney. Now as we can see in the picture here, this little chimney part is positioned to the left-hand side of the object. And then we also again have a triangle. So we're going to see a rectangle. So we'll draw that in here. So it's gonna look something like this. Okay, so that's the little chimney. Now the big chimney here, we can see not only is the shape important, but also the size and the positioning. So as we can see, this big chimney is positioned kind of halfway between this house. So that's where we're going to draw it in. So something like this. Okay, and our work is almost done. The only thing we need to do now is let's get rid of kind of this inside, these inside lines, because another important tip with these questions, we're only concerned about the overall general outline of the object. We're not concerned about these inside lines here. So that is what our kind of basic outline is going to look like. Okay, now let's look through our answers. And looking through our answers, we can see that A is not the answer. And that is because we can see that the little chimney is positioned on the right-hand side of the object as opposed to the left-hand side. And it's obviously too wide. So therefore, A is not the answer. Moving on to B, We can see now that the little chimney is perfectly placed, and that's roughly the size of it. It might be a little too big, but that's roughly what we're going for. However, in B, the chimney part is actually facing, or is positioned too far forward. It's not in the middle. So therefore, B is not the answer. And then finally, we go over to the last top-down perspective, and we can see here, look at this. We have the big chimney is far too wide. Okay, that's why size is important. We can see that this is wider than it is depicted in the figure, so E is not the answer. So based on just one perspective alone, we were able to eliminate over half the answers, okay? Now, let's go back to our next perspective. So now we're going to do the front view. And this is pretty much going to determine our answer here. Now, one thing to note about these, again, is that we're only concerned about the overall outline. So if you have objects that are inside the main outline, we're not really going to be concerned about it. And that comes into play right here with this small chimney, because it's sitting inside the main outline of the house, if that makes sense to you. So really what we're going to see is just the general outline of this house here. So we're going to see kind of like a home plate type shape, like that, with the small chimney sitting inside it. But again, that's not part of the main outline, so we're not considering it. Now, the only other part we need to kind of factor into this equation is the big chimney. And if we were looking head on, we would see it protruding out of the right side, and we can see that it's connected to the very top of the roof. So that leads us to draw in something like this, okay? And again, what we are going to do is we're going to get rid of the outside, or the inside lines, because we don't need those. They're not a factor in whether the object is going to fit through the hole or not. And that's what we see right here in answer C. So C is going to be our answer. And through this process of visualizing or drawing the outline and eliminating your answers and confirming the correct answer, you'll be able to fly through these questions once you get the kind of mental aspect down. But as far as D, we can kind of talk about D really quick. Even though we've already found our correct answer, we can see that there is a protrusion sticking up higher than the rest of the object. Well, there's nothing here that protrudes higher than anything else. At the top there's only one level, if that makes sense. There's no secondary level. Now, if you were, okay, we're going to draw this out. If we were looking at this side view, we'll actually go ahead and draw this out. I'm going to do this in red because this is the incorrect answer, but we're going to see a rectangle looking at it head on. Why? Because the large chimney fits inside the main object. Again, we have a slant slanting away from us, but again, we're just going to see a overall kind of rectangular shape. And then off to the side, we know that the small chimney is a slant and it's shorter. So that's what we would see. We would not see this side chimney being higher than the kind of the rest of the house, if you will. So that's pretty much how you approach these kinds of questions. Again, get really familiar with the top-down, the front, and side perspectives of three-dimensional objects, and you'll be able to fly through these questions and save yourself some time on the more difficult questions, which we will go through. This is just the first video in what I like to call the PAT Extravaganza. Thank you so much for listening to the video and listening to the podcast. I really appreciate it. And if you like this video, please let me know. You can go ahead and like this video or shoot me an email, as well as any suggestions that you may have or any particular questions that you would like me to go over. I'd be happy to do that. So thank you very much again for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.